Hi, I'm Alana. Welcome to another video. In today's video, we're doing a get ready with me for church. So, I've been reading the most interesting book. I actually mentioned it in a previous get ready with me. It's called Existential Psychotherapy by Irvin D Yalom. And it's so interesting. There's a chapter about death, a chapter about meaninglessness, a chapter about freedom, and a chapter about isolation. And so it's written by this psychotherapist, and he talks about, he includes case studies and examples of how his patients were wrestling with things like death and meaninglessness and isolation and freedom. And in the death chapter, it's so interesting because, say, for instance, he had two different patients come in on the same day, and they were both dying of cancer, of different kinds of cancer. And he said they dealt with it in such different ways. Like, one of them was just trying to find out everything that he could do to be the best version of himself. He was taking all the help that he could get from different people. He was learning from people and just spending time around people, trying to be the best version of himself before he died. And then another man, so the therapist, he saw both of these men in the same day, which highlighted the stark contrast between their reactions to cancer. So this other man, he found out he had cancer, and then he basically tried to just run away from it. He was okay, I'm going overseas. And his wife was you can't go overseas, you're dying. And he was no, I'm going overseas. And so then he basically just tried to run away from death. And so his wife was I'm not going with you. And so he just went traveling overseas alone to try and run away from his cancer. And I thought that was very interesting. And then there was another patient he had who was so afraid of death that he just couldn't stop having rampant sexual encounters with different women. And this man had a woman in every city, and they were all mad about him, probably because he was immensely withholding. And the therapist told him for an experiment to just try spending a night alone with yourself and not having sex with any women. And he tried this, and it was so challenging. And so he spent a night alone without having sex with any women, and the whole night he was alone in the dark. And I love being alone in the dark, but this man, he was practically hallucinating. He was practically hallucinating different images of death. He was so afraid to be alone and of his impending death that when he tried to spend a night alone in the dark, he just started hallucinating images of dead bodies, dead women and dead people, because he was so afraid of death that death was just stalking him. And and this same man, he encountered an opportunity to sleep with his boss's wife. His boss's wife came onto him, and this man was addicted to rampant sexual activity to try and quell his death anxiety. Hold on. So this man was addicted to rampant sexual activity to try and quell his death anxiety. And so when his boss's wife came onto him, he discussed it with the therapist, and he was yeah, I don't know what I should do. She wants to sleep with me, but she's my boss's wife. And so the therapist was well, perhaps you should consider the catastrophic personal consequences of this decision. If you do sleep with her, there are going to be catastrophic personal consequences that you will have to face. And so he took this on board, and like deeply considered his position, and he ended up saying no to his boss's wife's sexual proposition. And this was like a breakthrough for this man, because he had never really said no to a sexual, to the possibility of a sexual encounter in his life. And so finally he said no to this sexual proposition from his boss's wife. And this was like a huge breakthrough in his therapy. But then he was like really devastated, like he got really depressed and felt like really empty because he missed out on the sexual opportunity. So, tell you all the time, heaven is a place on earth with you. Tell me all the things you wanna do. I heard that you like the bad girls, honey. Is that true? And then I've just begun the chapter on freedom. And so the beginning of the chapter on freedom talks about responsibility. And it's talking about this program that sounds like a cult. Not sure if it's a cult, but this program called EST, wherein people go to these like events, and there are all of these rules. And they're basically for people who like struggle to take responsibility, but they're kind of like, it's hard to explain, but they're these events that people go to, and then like there are all these unnecessary or arbitrary rules where like you have to fold the napkins for the event like very specifically and very perfectly, and like arrange the chairs, and then when you're in the event you can't leave your chair, and it starts at like some time like 6 a.m. in the morning, and then like you have to go in, you're not allowed to leave, and you're only allowed to eat in like a certain period. And the idea is basically that like people like being told what to do. Like people enjoy rules and challenges, and people need rules and challenges and boundaries. And so it's called EST. It's some kind of like program, sounds like a cult, some kind of program where people can join and basically just learn to be less useless by doing arbitrary tasks. And it's basically about just like learning to be a responsible person, about learning to adopt responsibility. And then he had one client, this girl. So he has like group therapy groups, and he puts like 4 normal patients in with 1 dying patient, like 1 patient who has terminal cancer, and then he'll put them in a therapy group with 4 patients who are not dying, and just like force everyone to confront their mortality. And in this one group there was this man called Charles, and Charles was dying of cancer, and there was this girl in the group, and she like couldn't even stand to like look at Charles or like be around him because her parents had both died when she was young, and so she was just like aversive to the whole death like thing, whole death in general. And then there was another therapy group where there was this girl, and she was like every time she would come in and just be like talking about how useless and hopeless she was, and how like she really wanted to kill herself. And then all the group members would be like, oh no, don't kill yourself, like please don't kill yourself. And then the therapy group just turned into like everyone telling her like please not to kill herself. And the therapist confronted her with this and said like, I don't think that you are useless and helpless. I think that you just don't want to take on responsibility. Like I think that you are just refusing to adopt responsibility. So you are choosing to remain helpless because it means that you don't have to take responsibility for yourself and what happens to you. And then in the EST program, was kind of an approach of like ultimate responsibility, where the people in the EST program, like you would go, say like a 4-day event or something, and basically just get yelled at, like just get yelled at to take responsibility for your life. And like sometimes it was helpful in some circumstances. It was helpful in helping people grow into someone who could adopt responsibility. But then like in one example, there was a man and he was like, well, my wife has cancer and that is not something that I am able to take responsibility for. And this speaker was just like, no, it is your fault that your wife has cancer because like you're the one who chose to marry her and like you're responsible for your wife's cancer. Because the idea around EST is about like ultimate responsibility. But I think that maybe you can take these things a bit too far. Only worth living with somebody who's loving you. Baby, now you do. It's also really interesting reading about like how the patients grow to like love or adore their therapist. Like it's really interesting reading about positive transference and how like these patients come to regard the therapist as like their rescuer, like ultimate rescuer. He was talking about the ultimate rescuer fantasy, wherein some people, like, that's their whole plan for their lives, is that one day they will be rescued. And so that's called the ultimate rescuer fantasy. And so some people go into therapy and then they view the therapist as their ultimate rescuer. And so, and he had this one girl who would just come into every session like, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I think I'm going to kill myself. Please stop me. She would just be like, stop me, please, I'm going to kill myself. And he just had to say like, I can't stop you. If you want to kill yourself, I can't stop you. If you really want to kill yourself, no one can stop you. And she was like, wait, that's true. And by saying that, he forced her to like take some responsibility for her own self and her own feelings and thoughts and actions. And so I thought that was really interesting. It's the most interesting, most delicious book I've read in so long. Existential Psychotherapy by Irvin D Yalom. And so, thank you for getting ready with me for church today. Have a beautiful evening. You're beautiful. You're perfect. I love you. God bless you. If you're new, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel.